All right. Welcome, everybody, to today's In Good Hands session. We are up to letter 5. Okay, greetings and blessings. This is written by the Rebbe, 21 Menachem of 1950. By grace of God, this is before the Rebbe officially accepted the leadership of the movement. Was after the passing of the previous Rebbe. Greetings and blessings. In reply to your letter of 16 Menachem of, concerning your wife's health, you write of reasons for which she cannot conceive. However, this appears to be incomprehensible because the beginning of your letter mentions that in the beginning of Elul 5709, she was pregnant. If so, this can certainly be the case now too. In other words, the Rebbe recalled that the year earlier, the wife had been pregnant, and clearly she had the ability to conceive, and concerns about her health, the Rebbe seems to be indicating that it could be that she's pregnant, which is why she's having some issues around her health. It therefore seems to me that your wife should not undertake anything that would, according to what you write, be risky. The Rebbe is giving very practical advice, considering that, again, this is not 2024, where a quick test can produce all these results. Obviously, there was concern that in a positive way that she could be pregnant, but the Rebbe is saying that she needs to take care of her well-being, not to do anything that's risky. Let her once again consult a medical specialist as to what she should do, and he will no doubt find a moderate course of action. Through the agency of a particular doctor and a particular medication, everything will pass, and the blessing of my revered father-in-law, the Rebbe Rayatz, may I serve as an atonement for his resting place, I'll give you context in a second, will be fulfilled, that God will gladden your hearts with healthy and viable offspring. So clearly the previous Rebbe had blessed this couple with children, and the Rebbe is assuring that the previous Rebbe's blessing will be fulfilled. And the Rebbe is also identifying the role of a doctor in this journey. The role of a doctor is to be the agent for God's blessing. Doctors are not the healer. God is the healer. But God uses the agency of doctors to bring the healing. So let's contextualize the Rebbe is giving instruction to this individual to recognize the role of the doctor, that the doctor is the agency through which God's blessing will come, or in this case, the specific blessing of the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe Rayatz. In the parentheses, may I serve as an atonement for his resting place. There is a tradition that when a parent or a loved one passes away during the first year, we don't specifically say in loving memory of, or Zechron Levracha, maybe their memory be for a blessing. We say Hareini Kaparas Mishkave, may I serve as an atonement for their resting. It's kind of like this first year when in our tradition, it's a time of judgment before the soul enters into its kind of its destination in heaven. There's a time of atonement, and therefore we ask that we should be able to have some influence on that on this earth. So, but ultimately, God will gladden your hearts with healthy and viable offspring, because that's the previous Rebbe's blessing, and the doctor will be the agent for it. You're further right that from this whole situation, your wife has become nervous and so on. And this is where the conversation around trust begins. In other words, your wife is nervous. Why is she nervous? It should be explained to her that the Almighty directs the world in the manner that is best. He knows what is best, and he wrote in the Torah that children are a blessing. Jews are therefore deserving of it, because Jews are deserving of blessing. And if this blessing is sometimes delayed, it should be known that we all have a great Rebbe, my revered father-in-law, and in due course, he will make all his blessings materialize for all those who are bound to him. So a blessing given by a tzaddik is fulfilled, and therefore, because the previous Rebbe gave the blessing will be fulfilled, and it is a blessing. and you're a Jew, and Jews are deserving of blessing. So everything is lined up for this to come to pass in the best possible manner. However, one must hold tightly onto the bonds of iskashros with him. In order to be a recipient of the blessing, it's not a question whether the blessing is going to work or whether the blessing is going to be fulfilled. The question is on the receiving end, on the recipient end, what do we need to do to be able to receive the blessing? Blessing is like a flow, right? There's water flowing. Just because water's flowing, it doesn't mean you're going to get it. In order to get the water, you got to put a cup out there to hold the water. So what is the vessel? What is the vessel that receives blessing? The vessel that receives blessing is the bond that one has with the tzaddik, the connection to the righteous one. If instead one begins to be apprehensive about the fulfillment of his blessings, and this makes one become nervous, this is an indication of weakness, God forbid, in one's trust and in one's iskashros, one's connection. In particular, if it also affects one's health, it's certainly nothing more than the counsel of the evil inclination. So when instead of being positive and having faith and trust that the blessing of the tzaddik is going to be fulfilled, instead we show up with nervousness, that's an indication that we are not confident. Our vessel itself becomes somewhat damaged in the ability to actually receive the blessing. And if it goes further than that to affect one's well-being, one's health, then it must be coming from the counsel of the evil inclination. In other words, there's a formula, there's a spiritual formula, and the formula works, which is a tzaddik gives a blessing, God gives blessing to the Jewish people, and therefore, if the tzaddik gives a blessing and we are connected to the tzaddik, we should be able to receive that blessing. When instead of being positive about that, we become nervous, and God forbid if we become unwell as a result of that, that's a sign that we are not trusting in this process, and that itself damages the ability for us to be on the receiving end of the divine blessing. And so the Rebbe continues, she and you yourself must be strong in your trust in God and in Moshe, his servant. That's a quote from the introduction to the Ten Commandments, where God says that they will believe in you and in Moshe, his servant. In this case, the Rebbe being the servant of the generation. That is my revered father-in-law, and this in itself will help expedite and actualize his holy blessing for healthy and viable offspring and for all good things. So the trust in Hashem, and by extension in Moshe, his servant, becomes the vessel through which the blessing happens, and it expedites the blessing. And now on practical advice, the Rebbe says, before candlelighting, your wife no doubt makes a donation, b'li neder, without a vow, to the charity that carries the name of Rabbeinu Meir Baal HaNes, and every day you no doubt recite b'li neder, without a vow, the Rebbe's chapter of Psalms, which is currently chapter 71. So let's just contextualize a couple of the things here. Number one, before candlelighting, there's a practice to give tzedakah, to give some coins to charity. Specifically, the charity of Reb Meir Baal HaNes. Reb Meir Baal HaNes is one of the Talmudic sages. He was known as Reb Meir, the miracle worker. His resting place in Israel is a place of pilgrimage. And there are many charities in his honor that bring down blessing. Particularly the Alter Rebbe, the first of the Chabad Rebbes, established a number of charities in Reb Meir Baal HaNes, and it is encouraged to give tzedakah specifically to that charity before lighting the candles. In addition, reciting the Rebbe's chapter of Psalms, which is currently chapter 71. The previous Rebbe was 70 at the time, but we read the chapter going into the year that we are entering into. So when a child is born, they are in their first year. When a person turns 70, they're in their 71st year. Even though the previous Rebbe had already passed on, the Rebbe's instruction is that to continue reciting that chapter of Psalms, and that itself creates a connection to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe concludes that when your wife becomes pregnant in a good and auspicious hour, because the Rebbe has a positive outlook on the individual, and the Rebbe has the faith that the previous Rebbe's blessings is going to be fulfilled. So the Rebbe says, when your wife becomes pregnant, you will presumably not publicize the fact at the early stages, as is a custom in many circles, and particularly in Chabad, not to announce that the woman is pregnant until a later time, usually in the beginning in the 5th month. But you will immediately notify the Rebbe Rayatz at the holy resting place. Nonetheless, even though we don't make it public, this is articulated at the resting place of the tzaddik, from whom the blessing was, who had given them the blessing to become pregnant with blessings. So this is the letter. And so let's talk about what the takeaways are. The takeaways are, number one, that we are deserving of blessing as Jewish people, as God's children. Number two, blessing that comes from a tzaddik will find its mark. Blessing is something that a tzaddik actually channels into the world. We have to be on the receiving end of that blessing. We have to have the right vessels to receive. What are the right vessels to receive? That's a positivity. That's the faith in the tzaddik. That's a trust in God that his blessings will be fulfilled. The inverse of that is that when we are not positive about it and we're nervous and we're showing a sign of weakness, and when we're showing a sign of weakness, that's a sign that our trust is not in the right place, our connection is not in the right place, and let alone if it causes us to have physical illness, that's a sign that this is not coming from a holy source, because blessing brings with it only positivity. And then on a practical level, to engage in practices that help facilitate the blessing, which includes giving tzedakah before the Shabbat candle lighting, reciting psalms, and overall remaining positive. That is our session for today.